In 2018, ransomware advanced significantly and is now capable of taking out infrastructure and operations across the globe. As a result, many organizations are bogged down in reactive work and often overlook the value of crucial information. In Domain Tools' Threat Intelligence Report, learn how to uncover some of the most critical insights from your organization's alerts and indicators that will allow you to shift to a more proactive posture. To download this white paper, please visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/securityweekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Daily. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is the security news. Couple of quick announcements. We will be returning to Las Vegas this August for, of course, Hacker Summer Camp, which is Black Hat and DEF CON. At Black Hat, if you would like to request a briefing or a sponsored interview on site at Black Hat, go to securityweekly.com/booking. You can request those things. Very limited on the briefing side. Still some availability on the interview side. Basically, we're very heavy on the interview side because...
And the show side.
And the show side, right? So we're going to be doing 32 micro interviews. Is that... Did I get that?
No, 20.
20
sponsored interviews.
20 sponsored interviews.
And we're going to produce this show
Paul Security Weekly
from the event and Enterprise Security Weekly from the event.
So slots are filling up fast. So make sure you go to securityweekly.com/booking. We will have a suite. We have a suite reserved at Mandalay Bay.
We have a suite at Mandalay Bay.
Which means we'll have maybe a party, maybe.
The whole day is going to be a party.
There may or may not be a gathering.
There may or may not be cigars and liquor.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I think
that constitutes a party. Anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun. But we're going to be doing a lot of recording when we're there. And if you want to get in on that, it's a great way to get the message for your company out to the masses, essentially. Basically, if you're going to be at Black Hat, and most people send a lot of people to Black Hat, you come to our suite, record a 10 or 15-minute interview. We will broadcast that potentially live, depending on our bandwidth requirements. More importantly, we will publish that right away to our YouTube channel so you can use it to drive traffic to your booth at Black Hat. Then it airs live on Enterprise Security Weekly. Yeah. Or the recorded version airs on Enterprise Security Weekly. So everyone that listens to that show, which is a lot of people, will get to hear your message. And, we ask really basic questions, but, in the right context of, what problem do you solve? Why do you do it better than everyone else? So it's a chance for our listeners to, if they have a particular problem, hear about your solutions to that particular problem. So
2 questions with Enterprise Security Weekly. Who is your daddy and what does he do?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much that's it. Matt, you're going to Barcelona.
I am.
It's not for
it's
vacation.
Not for fun.
I mean, it is fun.
I'm
but
going
it's not,
to Italy after that for fun.
KubeCon and Cloud Native Con is going to be fun, and the thing you're doing with SysDig will be fun. But vacation in Italy after that. But more importantly, if you're going to KubeCon or Cloud Native Con, you can attend What is the CISTIG? What do they call it?
It's called the Cloud Native Transformation Summit.
Wait, I got it. It's the Cloud Native Transformation Summit.
Good. See, I had that memorized. I didn't even need the teleprompter for that.
Well, you're doing it, so
I better know what's going on.
I'm just Burgundy. I read what's on there. Hosted by CISTIG on May 20th. Our very own Matt Alderman will be emceeing the event. Pre-registration is required.
Yes. So if you're registering for KubeCon, you're going over to Barcelona, you can add it as a co-location event. I will be there on Monday to MC the event, host a panel during that session on cloud native transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope to see you there if you're going.
Sweet.
Awesome. I suppose we should talk about news, and I suppose that we should talk the remote code execution vulnerability.
Which one?
There's like 3 Microsoft articles you guys laid out this week. So
they're all around RDP.
Just the Microsoft ones, because this was a pretty damn big week.
Mm-hmm.
That's an understatement, Larry.
Yeah.
I mean, unprecedented. Microsoft put out an update to Windows XP, among other things.
Yeah.
Wait. I thought that was...
No. Jeff has a great point. The vulnerability is, technical terms, such a big deal, right? That Microsoft has released patches for even operating systems that are end of life.
Wow. That's not bad.
That doesn't happen very... Was WannaCry the SMB vulnerability the last time they did that? Yeah. So this is... Yeah. Everyone is speculating that this is probably the next kind of WannaCry thing. Now, RDP, very much of it is exposed to the internet. I mean, you can do a quick Shodan search and find tens of thousands or more exposed to the internet. And I was like, well, that's bad. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. If you were to get on the inside of someone's network, you could find a lot more RDP, obviously.
Right.
And so it very much kind of mirrors the WannaCry kind of situation. It remains to be seen. The reports that I've read have said that they have not observed, no one to my knowledge, that I read anyway, has observed this being exploited in the wild. However, it's obvious, right? Anytime the stakes are this high, someone is going to figure out how to exploit this remotely, or at least people are going to try really hard on how to exploit this remotely. How reliable that will be, I think, remains to be seen. Again, from what I've observed so far, this story is about 2 days old, so we'll see how things unfold. It has certainly, I can say with confidence, the potential to have a very significant impact similar to WannaCry.
And hackers have a new way in.
Yep.
Good for the pen testing business. But, I mean, we haven't seen a lot of remote vulnerabilities. I mean, I think over the years we've done a better job of closing down the remote vulnerability exploit side. But when these things come up, because they're exposed to the internet, because of how open these are on internal systems, this has a potential, yet to be seen, of somebody really exploiting this and doing some damage.
What'll be interesting is comparing this to the SMB vulnerability. I think that really the SMB vulnerability really has the potential to impact the end user, in that if you've got 50,000 users in your organization that are accessing files that exist on shares, applying a patch across your entire organization could be a huge deal, right? And I'm not saying that an RDP patch could not have a negative impact, but it probably is not impactful as users accessing shares. Mostly, I mean, again, a lot of exceptions, but mostly administrators are using RDP to access systems. The patch, in my mind, should be rolled out a lot more quickly than I think an SMB style patch, given those kind of set of parameters. But again, you don't know how people are using RDP. It could be the way that users are accessing things as well. Also, an administrator that goes, well, I need to go remote into that system that can't do that. That's also an impactful kind of event. Again, not as impactful as users can't do their jobs, right? So I don't know. There's that.
Maybe.
And a whole lot of other factors in this one. How exploitable is it? Is always the question when new Windows remote code execution vulnerabilities come out.
Yep.
Right. We've had the tried and true, 08067. We've had the tried and true, WannaCry style exploits. It's interesting to see how this vulnerability will compare to the kind of tried and true remote code execution vulnerabilities in Windows.
Yep.
So a couple things from the article Microsoft posted. One of the things they basically said there's no workarounds or mitigations to shut this down other than patching it. And the CVSS scores for all the different OSs are at like 9.8 across the board. Well, or 8.8 depending which way you view it, but still basically pretty darn exploitable. You're just sending a specially crafted packet, and I guess aside of turning off RDP, there's just nothing to prevent it.
And how many people are going to turn off RDP when they're using it for administrative remote access into these boxes? That's a really
functions. And
my concern is across the internet, this is more impactful than SMB, in my opinion.
Yes, because it's potentially exposed to the internet way more than
in 2003.
SMB.
A lot of people looked at TCP 445 and 139 and was like, yeah, no. In fact, a lot of ISPs were blocking that because it's like, no. Very few ISPs, in my opinion, or organizations are looking at like, let's cut off all 3389 TCP access because of RDP. Because it's a remote administration protocol, has a higher potential, obviously, to be accessible over the internet. I mean, we've already seen reports. I mean, we know. I mean, many people know. In fact, all of us could go access the data that says at this point in time, from fairly recently, right? These are the number of exposed RDP services on the internet.
Yeah.
There's a ton of them. And there's been tons of research on this.
Yep.
Yeah, and Shodan makes it really easy to go find them all.
Not just Shodan, Rapid7 has projects, right? There's several other companies that are publishing information about what's accessible on the internet at any given time. It's interesting to see how much of that will get cleaned up over time.
All the security scorecard bit site scores just went through the roof.
Yeah.
With this one.
For sure.
Yep. That's what happened.
So because Microsoft was lonely, it was also released in the last couple of days that Cisco has remote command execution in their iOS XE version 16, which affects a ton of shit. It's also
is that an official term? Ton of shit.
Yes, it's also the first exploit to be named after a series of emoji.
This is the
Thrangry cat. The three angry cat emojis.
And this is a remote
command injection.
Yep. Interesting.
And
I thought this was more about a firmware backdoor kind of thing.
No, it is failures in the hardware for the FPGA for Cisco's Trust Anchor module. It's their custom their custom FPGA for their Trust Anchor stuff, which handles all of the sort of the trustworthy computing. As a result of being able to do some bitstream modification, you can effectively disable all of their trusted computing type of stuff and lock the device out from ever being upgraded.
Yeah.
So you can not just backdoor the firmware, you can inject code into the firmware as well.
And not allow it to be updated to be patched.
Yep.
Is what he just said.
That's really
I don't know how many of you guys watch The Daily Show, but I feel like this news segment should be the "We ain't got time for that" episode.
Yes, agreed. But we ain't got time for that.
Let's move on to the next devastating vulnerability that was published this week.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jeff. Go for it.
Would that be Intel?
Yep, Intel CPU
yeah, let's
hardware.
do the Intel one. Yeah, go for it. I don't have details. I'm just overwhelmed by wow, there's just so many this week.
I didn't get enough detail on the Intel CPU ones, but MDS hardware vulnerabilities in Intel CPUs.
I think just like now that my impression with the very quick read was, with the Spectre meltdown, making people starting to look at chips maybe a different way. The floodgates are now opening up, and they're finding lots of new ways to attack the chipsets.
Is this a similar attack to Spectre in Meltdown, or is it different?
It's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
Well, they're taking advantage of the speculative execution that the chips can do, but it's different. Other than that, they're taking advantage of the feature in the chip.
Yep.
I mean, I think roughly it's kind of like coming up with the idea.
Referred to as microarchitectural data sampling. Side channel vulnerabilities in Intel CPUs. It can leak in-flight data from CPU internal buffers, including data never stored in CPU caches. Existing defenses against speculative execution are inadequate, in some cases actually make things worse. They can use the MDS attacks to leak sensitive data despite mitigations due to vulnerabilities deep inside Intel CPUs.
Mm.
And all this stuff broke this week.
And more.
Oh, yeah. Do you think it's true, maybe this is a question for Larry, is it analogous to, something like a set UID or a buffer overflow where somebody figured out a technique and now they're just pointing it at a lot of different things saying, "Ooh, let's see if it'll work here. Let's see if it'll work here."
I can't state for certain, but I would argue that it's more of along the lines of that they discovered a technique and they're now pointing it at different places and, oh my gosh, look how deep that rabbit hole goes.
Yeah.
And that rabbit hole, in fact, went quite deep in this particular case.
Oh, so sorry. Going back to Cisco, Thangry Cat is 2 exploits. One bypasses the trusted anchor module. The second is a remote code injection vulnerability against Cisco iOS XE version that allows remote command execution as root. So there's 2.
Got it.
On Hack Naked News this week, if you listen to that.
You covered the second one, I think.
I covered the first one, actually.
The first one.
In the bypassing of the trusted, I want to say trusted computing module. It's trusted anchor module, which...
Same damn thing.
From what I read was basically validating that the firmware that's running is actually the firmware that came from Cisco and has not been tampered with. That can be bypassed. The second exploit and associated vulnerability is a remote command execution of vulnerability, which I did not mention on Hack Naked News this week. I apologize.
We talk more about it, but we ain't got time for that.
We ain't got time. There's so many vulnerabilities and exploits this week that we just don't have time to talk about all of them.
And because we ain't got time for that, IBM also released on RCE and WebLogic today.
Good Lord.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Does anybody still use WebLogic? Oh, I guess there are.
Yes.
I remember...
WhatsApp.
I remember WebLogic from my days of working with Java.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like their version of a Java application server.
Yes.
Yep.
Is the way I remember it.
Yep. Correct.
I'm old. My memory kind of is not.
But that's why I asked the question: who's still using it? Now, I'm sure there's legacy applications, Java-based legacy applications.
Java. Not even. I wouldn't even put the word legacy in there. Java.
It's IBM.
Even still, you're doing Java. The chances are likely that you're using some framework such as WebLogic, and not thinking of it as legacy. I think it's a perception, right? Like you're maintaining or creating applications. Your platform is potentially WebLogic. I think us as security people tend to underestimate how popular and prevalent Java is in terms of
how sticky it is.
Yeah. And how sticky it is.
Every time I go to install Java, it tells me a horror story. The five-word horror story.
Is that like IO exception?
No, 3 billion devices run Java.
Yeah. From a Java perspective, I get it. But how many are using the WebLogic framework to deliver their Java because there are other frameworks out there.
I know. But WebLogic has been entrenched in so many industries for so long that it's
that's
hard
what they
to
use.
migrate from.
And they're like, Spring. You mentioned Spring, and they're like, what? What is that? That's like the new Java. Lee? But like, you can't understand.
Lee?
Hold on. I'll go to you next, Lee. So a little background. In 2001, when did I? Yeah, early 2000, right?
We're old. You're old.
I'm old. Like almost 20 years ago.
We got to think about dates. We're like, where was I in that year?
Almost 20 years ago, right? Server-side Java was a thing. There were lots of frameworks to support that. There were millions and millions of lines of Java code even 20 years ago. So now think about how that's progressed over 20 years. People haven't moved off of that. There's just millions and millions and millions of lines of more Java code on essentially the same frameworks. Like
yeah, but when I was building Java apps, I wasn't using WebLogic.
Hold on. It's server-side Java, client-side Java, right? Client-side Java, sure, going the way of the dinosaur. Server-side Java is still a thing, and there's still like millions of applications that use it. I think over the years I've downplayed how prevalent Java is because we tend to talk about like the new hipster things, and we love to code in Python as hackers. We love Python, we love Ruby, right? Those are really cool. We love Docker, so we're deploying all these things in Docker, and we use them in React and Angular. But like much of the world that you use today in terms of software, largely still Java, and largely Java on the server side.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, and kind of only half joking, is there such a thing as serverless side Java?
Jeff, that is a very good question. I like that.
Known as JavaScript.
What I was going to say is that, and I haven't looked in a while, but Oracle put their e-business suite on top of WebLogic. So a lot of people are running their ERP on top of WebLogic.
Yep.
And they deploy the same app stack for their custom stuff. So they got their developers creating.
Yeah, so there's we're an enterprise. We wrote an app in-house in Java, and that's a percentage, right? But like what Lee is saying is we acquired these different software suites in the enterprise, and we're integrating them together, and it's Java, and it's running on a framework, and we really have no control over that. And that is, I think, a lot more prevalently, right, than many of us think, right, in terms of software development.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I asked the question. I mean, you brought up the Oracle use case, right? How many people are still using Oracle? Now, there's still a lot of people.
Yeah.
But also, as you're thinking about your digital transformation activities, you're probably not building to IBM and Oracle. But there's a lot of legacy. I think both of your points, there's a lot of legacy that's happening.
Hey, we're going to write an application in React and deploy it serverless, let's say, right? And that's like in my opinion, listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, right?
That's a smaller portion.
That's a small portion. When I talk to my friends, like my friend Dave, we really need to have Dave on the show, right? He's like, yeah, dude, like that's the thing. But like most people, most large financials, most like big companies that have a lot of software, like, dude, they're totally like Java and
IBM and Oracle and all this other stuff.
Oracle, and a lot of so there's like a middle ground, right? Like maybe they're not like, hey, we're hipsters and we're gonna make a React thing and we're gonna deploy it serverless, right? And we're not like traditional like Java running on Oracle WebLogic. We're maybe somewhere in between. The popular framework is Spring, which gives you some of that like DevOps style, like newer framework capability, and that's new to them, right? What we talk about largely, and like, or what you and John and Mike talk about on Application Security Weekly, I think is the kind of like almost bleeding edge in this perspective, right?
Yeah, I got a news flash for you. Companies that invest millions of dollars in infrastructure tend to like to keep it.
I agree, Jeff. I agree.
They don't like to spend that money every year.
Yeah,
I mean, which is counterintuitive to the culture that we've built, where you got to get a new mobile phone every I think the average is maybe 18 months, or certainly that's what the vendors want move you to, or new what are these things in front of us? Laptops.
I think it's a great. But potentially, I think it's potentially a great talk about in security and or software development. Talk about the evolution of languages and frameworks for software development, right? Like you think about COBOL, right? Like in 1999, we're all like crapping our pants because 2000 was going to come and we're all coding in COBOL. You have to understand, I was in graduating college in 1999 because I'm old. Java was a new course.
Yes.
In my school. Right now, but I wasn't in a hardcore engineering school. I was in a business school that was an information system. Java was a new language. We were all like, this is great. We can think in an object-oriented way.
And we can write code and it'll run everywhere.
It'll write, right? That was one of the things with Java, Larry. Very good point. It was somewhat, I don't want to say type safe. That's not necessarily the right term, but it was safer. There was protections. There was memory, garbage collection. That was an innovative thing 20 years ago. And
there was a sandbox.
There was a sandbox, right? So we started this adoption of Java, and it's going, I think, in the same kind of path as COBOL, right? Now these newer languages are coming out in the past 5 years. It's another 20-year kind of progression if we look at history before we start adopting these newer languages, which means there's a ton of legacy code. Yeah. In fact, there's still COBOL applications today.
Right, because the mainframe, although is dead, it's not dead because the mainframe still exists in the environment.
Federico was saying we spent a year designing the application. You may spend a year or two in a team of a couple of people or maybe 20 or 30 people developing this application. To replicate that is a huge cost to the business. Therefore, adoption of these newer technologies will slow, which means when we talk about these security vulnerabilities, potentially there's a lot of enterprises, there's a lot of small, medium businesses, off-the-shelf software that is written in these languages and frameworks.
Well, and we're discovering on a fairly regular basis, vulnerabilities that are 10, 15, 20 years old because the things that we're running today are running on, frameworks, and there's bits and pieces that are left over from stuff, or we're using stuff that we've been using that long. I forget the names of all of them. What was the thing with Bash a couple years ago? And Bash was the shell that I learned to I guess maybe in the commercial world we used Bash when I started running Linux, but we swore by the Bash shell, and then 20 years later, there's been a problem in Bash all along. If we can get philosophical maybe for a minute, I mean, this is why I've been giving a talk this year. I love getting philosophical,
by the way, Jeff.
The talk that I've been giving this year is entitled "What Are We Doing Here? Let's Rethink Security," because we have spun up an industry that's laser focused on vulnerabilities, and what happens and it started the idea for this talk started with the Spectre Meltdown thing, but what happens when the solution isn't simply go out and install the patch? Or take this week, what happens when a half dozen major patches drop that you have to, figure out how to roll out to your entire enterprise
across 12 different technologies?
And Jeff, I agree, and I love that you're typically the first one to say this isn't new, right?
It's not new.
And to Jeff's point, what I don't know, I get excited about it, and it's not a good thing, right? But when we talk about Spectre and Meltdown and the branch prediction kind of vulnerabilities. Again, I vividly remember in 1999, my computer science teacher writing on the whiteboard, not even the whiteboard, it was a chalkboard back then, branch prediction. And here we are 20 years later going, yeah, there's some serious security vulnerabilities with that, right? The technology is not new. Maybe the discovery of the vulnerability at that point in time is new. And
my point... Well, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
No, I was hoping you wouldn't interject there. I really didn't have a thought.
No. I had a great play into Jeff. I agree with you in some. I agree with you a lot in that we really haven't evolved the way we think about security.
It's true.
Right?
Well, I go even further. It's not that we haven't evolved. We've never embraced security the way I learned how to do it in the DoD. We have heard people like me that came out into the private sector and essentially, and I've literally heard this from customers. Yeah. That all sounds well and good. Just, but we don't need DoD level security. Just tell us what we need to buy, where to put it, what color is the blinky light supposed to be. Don't make us have to understand all these principles and processes and procedures and make people think and build a culture around security where everybody understands their role and actions and inactions, what the impacts are. It was a lot of alliteration. I didn't mean to do that. But let's just and I'm guilty of it too. Let's just build a secure perimeter. Let's throw up firewalls, and then let's throw up intrusion detection. Let's figure out where your vulnerabilities are, because you have networks and now you're plugging them into the internet. So let's start doing pen testing and vulnerability scanning and red team exercises and so on and so forth. And while I thought that was appropriate in the beginning, I kind of thought we'd move on. And yet we're addicted to this whole
layering concept.
Yes. And it seems like all there is to this industry, and I'm generalizing a little bit, is the endless quest for the next vulnerability. So the question I ask in my talk is, and I don't want to go through my whole talk, but what if vulnerability discovery and mitigation is not all there is to it? And what if that's not even really security? What if that's just, you're an admin, you're a developer, you write secure code, you build secure boxes, you keep them secure, you monitor them? What if the whole vulnerability hunt isn't security at all? What else is there that we could be doing? What else is there out there that might be something that we should focus on? Because very quickly, there's this thing called a risk equation, and vulnerability is a variable, and it's all designed to reduce risk. And everybody is focused on, vulnerability, that's like the only variable we can control. Let's reduce that, and then we've reduced risk. I don't know the technical term, but what if the variable vulnerability in the risk equation is more like a constant? It's there to stay. We all agree vulnerabilities are here to stay. What else is there to focus on? What else should we be looking at? Let's get over the vulnerabilities and figure out what else we can do and still try to maintain secure organizations for our own companies and our customers.
I need that sunburst back over your head, because you just hit the moment. Where's the sunlight?
I can't make the sun come back up.
But you're right? To me,
of course I'm right.
This has been the age-old problem with security: is we layer after the fact. And my belief has been, how do we embed security in earlier so that these layers that are always behind we're not there. We're not behind. We're more ingrained in the infrastructure, the application, the components that we need to do. This was one of the things. Jeff was there. You were there. This is one of the whole strategy thoughts about where could Tenable take themselves from how do you move from a afterthought to a design by design? All right, security by design.
It makes me think that we're still immature in our thinking of security.
I think so. The last section was a perfect example of that, by the way.
Absolutely. Right.
Where we've always known username and passwords. So instead of reinventing username password, we just layered a whole bunch of shit on top of username and password to try to make it better.
Yes.
Right? Instead of going back to the root problem of username, password, and all the shit we added after that sucked. So let me rethink the problem and come up with a different way.
I didn't want to get into it with our esteemed guest because he was having a good time, and you guys were too. But I would simply ask the question, is authentication, which is what user ID and password are used for, is that actually a security thing at all? Or is that something else?
Yeah, is that just it's a great philosophical point, Jeff, I think. And I don't mean to downplay it by saying it's a philosophical point, but is proving that you are you to access an application really just part of the application and not something that we call security today.
Well, and that's sort of my punchline for my talk is, what if all this stuff that we think is security, and I lay out the risk equation and kind of define all the different components and parts, and technically security is not even in the equation at all. And my question is, what if all this stuff that we call security isn't security at all? It's just our job.
It's just a requirement.
It's a requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's table stakes.
Now, let me get a little more philosophical, even in that we in technology in general, security side, technology, right? I think we draw a lot of inspiration from science fiction, right? Uh-huh. A lot of technological advances have mirrored what we've seen in science fiction movies and in TV shows, right?
Mostly Star Trek.
Star Trek. Now, where I'm going, and that's a great segue.
Because lightsabers don't exist yet.
But where I'm going is, if you haven't, and this is my tweet for this, one of my tweets this week, the Orville is Seth MacFarlane's take on a Star Trek-like science fiction show. Now, there is this, in season 2, I don't want to ruin it for people, so if you haven't watched the Orville, fast forward. I'll try not to ruin it for you. But basically, there are humans that are captured by the enemy alien race, right? And they resurface 20 years later, and they get, basically sent home to the human race, and the humans ask them, why didn't you try to contact us when you were being incarcerated by the alien race? They say, well, we didn't want them to intercept our communications because that could have meant torture and or death. And the security person to me is listening to that going, okay, so you're saying that hundreds or 1,000 years in the future that we haven't locked in this thing called encryption and secure communications against alien races. Now, if you really want to get philosophical, how do you protect communications against a technologically advanced alien race?
And I wouldn't even go that far, because if we start going down Matt's route, you design it to be secure from the beginning. But I don't think you can ever design something to be secure from the beginning. It may be secure at that point in time in which it is designed.
Right. So it has to morph and understand and learn and continue to protect itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But I mean, and going back to Jeff's point, if we design a communications protocol, part of that design shouldn't be, we need to think about security. Security should be part of the design. The ability to provide integrity for that message and the ability to protect the privacy of an interception of that message should be part of the communications protocol. And you would think that in the science fiction realm that would be part of it, such that if you were captured by the enemy, you could securely transmit a message without the concern of someone could intercept that, right? Well, and I think that's a very fundamental kind of thing we don't think about today. We design today more so for functionality than anything else, including security and or integrity or privacy.
Well, yeah, and that's basically what I was going to say. The great divide is that I think there's a reasonable expectation that society has that if they're going to use technology, they think it's secure, whatever that means. And that's a whole discussion we can have, hopefully over bourbon and cigars in Vegas. But yeah, I mean, the company that I'm working for right now, my customer, the development teams that I'm working with, their job is to make the thing work.
Functional.
Functional
requirements.
And they have some pretty lofty, hard to reach, hard to maintain performance specifications that they have to meet, or else they lose their job. Guess what? That's what they worry about.
Security
doesn't factor into the equation.
No. And not only does it not factor into the equation, they are very classically, which I've seen for a long time. It's not new. They view security as an impediment. It's a distraction, and in this case, it's compliance. But to me, PCI is security. But anything that they have to do that is PCI related is taking them away from their day job. And so they have no concept of, no, security is something that should be a part of what you do. It should be built into the fabric of what you do at an appropriate level for what you're doing. But they're not there.
And I'm a big Seth MacFarlane fan. I'm thinking he needs a security consultant to his show, because there's another episode where I described it, I think last week, where a virus infects the ship, and he needs a security consultant on the show. I'm volunteering for the job.
But we talked about aspects of this
as a volunteer
with
Seth,
Sarah on
listening.
ESW, right? This whole shift of how do you move security in, right? And the way I described it, Jeff, and you may not disagree too much with this, is we've got decentralized development, but we've got centralized security, and they don't mesh.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's this outside centralized entity that's trying to be the dictator on top of this. And it doesn't work that way. And the conversation we had is, how do you take this monolithic outside security organization, mesh it in with what you're doing from a development perspective, and bring more security into that process that doesn't impact development and the timelines for development, and make some more secure code, versus development does what it does, and then it has to throw it over the fence over here, and these guys are like, yeah, no, we can't do that, right?
The question is, why isn't security a functional requirement?
Because the business is driving it, and security has always been outside of the business units, in my opinion, and not integrated tightly into the business.
Capitalism is shitting on security in that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, money will always drive the business at the end of the day. Security isn't driving the business. I'm sorry, but it's not.
So in the Star Trek realm, everything is secure because we've abstracted that capitalism layer.
It's not. No, it's not.
No?
No.
Because the aliens interface with the ship, and then they download the entire database of the Starfleet.
True.
All the time.
All the time.
What Matt's describing is part of the problem. I think the more fundamental problem is the assumption, and I see this all the time because I go to too many conferences these days, but the young people that are coming up in our industry, they are of the belief that if you're talking about security or cybersecurity, you're talking automatically about technology. Mm-hmm. I believe that it's fundamentally a business problem, that you need to understand what your goals and objectives are, and you need to have some working definition of what security is. Ask somebody, I'm not going to do it now, ask somebody to define security the next time you go out to an event and watch them stumble. I mean, I've asked people that are also in the Tribe of Hackers books, that are SANS instructors, well-instructed, uber people in the field, and they stumble over simply, what is security? I'm not going to name names, malware Jake. But
wow.
Well, he and I are supposed to be doing a webinar sometime soon to try to answer that question. He put it out on Twitter to ask everybody, let's have your input, define security. The more fun to me, I'm the old guy curmudgeon going to go down swinging, but I don't think we've really captured how to do security the way it used to be done by the organization, which was the DoD, that really worried about security in the first place when it had to do with human life.
Yep. This is where you and I totally agree on this front, is that if you're not aligned to the business, you don't understand business objectives, you don't understand what the business is trying to do, how are you going to integrate security into that model? Because look, at the end of the day, if you're this external entity sitting over here on the side, just being this, no, you can't do that. Look, the business is going to find a way around you. Mm-hmm. They absolutely are, and they've been doing this for years. And this is one of the big things that I think security professionals have to understand is have a business acumen. understand what the business is trying to do, figure out ways to put controls in place as part of the process, and help build a more secure environment instead of being this outside entity that is always looked at as like the Department of No.
No.
Right, exactly.
Security should never be about no. Security should be about no, but.
Or yes, but.
Wow. Yes, but.
Yes, but. Yes, I can do that,
yes,
but
how.
here's the things we need to do to make that more secure. Because as soon as you say no, you turn the business off, and the business is like, well, I can't work with the security team, so I'm going to go do this thing anyways.
And you're right. I misspoke. It should never be no. It should be yes, but. Lee.
Or yes, how this is you're going to do it.
So there's one more aspect to what Jeff was saying that I think we need, and Matt, and that is I'm reminded the button on my shirt says PEBCAC. You got to get the user in there. Going back to your Star Trek analogy, remember Khan thinking two-dimensionally in a three-dimensional world. The users aren't necessarily ready for the security measures, or they forget them, then game over.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes.
It does.
We're a 3D world thinking 4D. Oh, sorry.
I think science fiction teaches us that functionality, politics, and privacy are contradictory to security.
Yes. Yep. In a lot of respects. And we have to fight that battle and figure out how to embrace aspects of that and integrate ourselves into those components and really be business leaders that understand those aspects and then figure out how to build programs and solutions to help enable that. And that's where I see the big disconnect. I still see it to this day. We've made progress. Don't get me wrong. There are organizations out there that do this well and have done this well, but there's a lot of organizations that don't do this well, and they haven't gone through this evolution.
Well, and the ones that do it well for one of two reasons. They're regulated or they've been burned. There are no other. I don't know any company that just does it just because it's the right thing to do.
Yep. Paul, if I may, in the spirit of moving us along a little bit.
I was hoping Jeff would say PCI, but
he did.
He did twice.
Yeah.
Two drinks.
In the spirit of moving us along a little bit, I'd like to give us a sci-fi dad joke. Convincing your significant other that they're crazy or paranoid is called gaslighting, and it's a dick move. Convincing them that they are a robot with artificially implanted human emotions is called blade running, and it's a Philip K. Dick move.
Wow. Went way off the rails.
Sort of loosely on the lines of science fiction, Paul made a statement a little while ago about security, almost making it sound like security is a separate entity. It's a separate being, even a sentient being, perhaps. I think that's one of the other fallacies, is thinking that security is a separate function within an organization that is there to lord over and say yay or nay or yes or no or whatever and dictate how things are done. Whereas I think security needs to be more ingrained within the culture of the organization and just understood. It's not, obviously there needs to be people that do security.
Right.
But the idea that it's a separate thing, I think that's one of the fallacies that we've created in our society, frankly.
And I agree, Jeff, and I think security needs to be part of the functional requirements. It needs to be part of the privacy of the people who are using the system. I think it needs to be part of the integrity of the system. The difficult part is, how does security interact with the politics of it all? Is a separate thing, right? You
being under the CIO doesn't give you that ability.
Politics in a more general sense, Matt, like
right.
We may allow insider threat may happen because we need to let people into our organization for political reasons.
But that's
right?
understanding business alignment and understanding business requirements of why that has to happen. And so I think the one big issue in our space, and some CISOs will hate me for this, is that CISOs are not this autonomous unit that sits outside of everything else. What I truly believe, and part of the thesis of why I built the strategy at Tenable, was that security control components would be embedded more into the business function. Security moves from an operational perspective more to a governance layer, and that they're governing what is happening, but the core components of what we do from security are more embedded into the business. And like I said, there are organizations that are doing this, and there's organizations that are I think just fighting it, right? Because now the CISO is getting more visibility. They're getting elevated. But if you are a good CISO, you are truly a partner to the business. And maybe that means part of your team is literally embedded in the business and not a separate outside entity
But what can still burn organizations is the kind of overextension of trust, right? You may have great security. However, you're going to merge, partner, or maybe purchase another company. Inherently, you might trust or not, but you may trust that organization, and that could be what burns you in your security.
But hopefully you're not.
But politically, you may have to trust that organization, right?
Yeah, and that's the barriers that we have to continue to break down our industry.
All I will say on that trust thing is 580 out of the 612 users in the domain were in the domain admin users group.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Trust is a huge issue. And again, we may trust for political reasons over anything else. We may understand that functionally having the 80% of our users in domain admins is bad, that for privacy that it's bad. But for political reasons, we have to give those users that trust.
Oh, they have to do it, right? But again, you have to understand why, and then you have to figure out how to mitigate.
I'll give you a great example of that after the show, because I don't want to spoil some of the content I've been consuming that I don't want to spoil for the listeners, right? As to how that plays out politically, which is why I kind of, being a security person, consuming content and storylines made me think differently about the political aspect as it relates to trust, which could be an issue.
No Game of Thrones spoilers, please.
Right. No, I don't watch Game of Thrones. I do, I want to go, all the talk about Game of Thrones makes me want to go back to watch Game of Thrones from the beginning.
Yeah, I think we need to, because we started and we're 2 seasons behind already.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing all the final episodes.
No,
you're like,
we're not. And spoilers, because I don't really pay attention to them. I just know to skip. And
I do too. Same thing with Avengers Endgame. When I see an article that says Avengers in it, I just skip it.
And the sad part is, I don't even care if they spoil it, because I'm still going to go watch it for its entertainment value.
Yes.
Yeah.
From what I gather, it's a very well done show. From what I've seen,
yes. So well I wanted to political. You talked about the political aspects, and you have an article in here about Singapore and the fake news piece.
Lee does.
Speaking
of fallacies,
right, I mean, from a political standpoint, right? This concept of fake news law passed after 2 days of debate, banning fake news in Singapore. Very interesting concept, but you have to understand Singapore. And having traveled there for a number of years.
I was alive in the 90s and remember
caning.
Yes. Thank you, Larry. Who is the guy? What's his name? There are listeners, and I love when we do this, because I just envision our listeners being in the car that were alive in the 90s, that remember the Singapore caning and are screaming out the person's name.
In 1996, who was what was the name of the person
who was caned?
Who was the name of the person that was caned for spray painting graffiti on a Mercedes?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have to understand the Singapore environment is it's democratic yet
authoritarian.
Yeah, that's a good word to put, right? Is that there's a rule of law across the country.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, and when you
is that what you got on Google too, Lee? Is Michael Fay?
Yes. Same one.
Oh, you guys.
1994.
You're Googlers.
See, I was close. I said 96.
You were on point, and you remembered that he spray painted
graffiti.
And
I don't remember if it was a Mercedes, but it was on a car.
A great trivia question would be how many times he was caned. I want to say it was 6, but anyway.
I think you're right.
Anyway, looking at your news feed, or your Wikipedia, anyways, which could be right or wrong. I'm not quite sure.
True.
But if you've been to Singapore, you understand kind of the top-down authoritative rule of the country. And here they pass a law around fake news. And not promoting fake news, and it now becomes a criminal offense. I just think it's really interesting from a political standpoint because, look, they have a ton of...
It's right here. Michael Fay is a United States citizen who was the subject of international attention in 1994. Larry, you were close.
Oh, yep. Close.
He was sentenced to 6 strokes of the cane in Singapore for theft and vandalism at the age of 18. Caning.
Blah,
blah,
blah. You and I will have to talk Singapore because I'm going later this year.
Oh, wait. The number of cane strokes in face sentence was ultimately reduced from 6 to 4 after United States officials request. So United States government at that time in 1994 could only get it reduced by 2 strokes.
But that's a third.
Lee is dying. Look at Lee is dying after.
4 strokes. That's twice as many than I need.
Wow. What are you going to do with the other 2 minutes and 40 seconds?
Oh, God.
Clean up.
But this was your political link, right? Banning fake news.
That was Lee's.
Oh, was it Lee's? It was sorry, Lee.
Anyway,
I'm sorry. I gave credit to Paul when it's yours.
I don't know how we get it. Anyway.
You remember Taiwan a couple weeks ago was doing, as part of their military exercise, they were doing anti-fake news exercises. They intended to shut down fake news coming in during a cyber strike.
How do you do that exactly?
It's an interesting move.
Great Chinese firewall.
How do you do that? How do you determine what's fake and what's real? Because
block certain news networks.
Yeah.
Snopes? No. Snopes used to be reliable. I feel like it's gone off the deep end.
For all the stuff that my mother-in-law sends me, it's perfectly reliable.
True. Very true. Very true.
Is this real?
My mother-in-law sends it to you too, Mark?
Wow.
I think that if you're questioning whether it's real or not, more than likely it's not.
Well, the problem is that people don't question it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I question it.
The problem is somebody says we're going to go to war, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and it tanks the stock market, for example, right?
Right.
Connected to the global economy. That has ramifications beyond some of the things we think about, even a
previous conversation on trust and integrity, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's the verify part of trust but verify. That's one of the pieces we didn't get so far as it.
No, I think Lee. In all honesty, I think that's backwards. I think in today's day and age, the rate at which information and data flows, you need to verify and then trust.
Okay.
I'm just waxing poetic on this episode.
It's all those martinis.
You're waxing that. I mean.
So much that I'm down from 6 strokes to 4, Larry.
But he's down to 2, so you still win.
Define winning exactly.
Or he wins. I don't know. Someone's winning.
Whatever gets you to the finish line, Paul.
That's right.
Hey, if I can try to pull it together.
Please do, Jeff. Save the show.
Significantly shift gears.
Please do.
My first story, I just wanted to acknowledge one of the Navajo code talkers from World War II just passed away this past week at 97.
How many do we have, Jeff? How many do we have left?
I'm not sure. Just
Jeff,
a handful?
I don't know how much knowledge you have of the background of that. And I got to be honest, most of my knowledge of that is based on the X-Files and reading about how they integrated that into the show. Just throwing that out there. But again, the kind of popcorn Hollywood movie TV show made me research the actual facts, but that was a real thing in World War II, correct?
Yeah.
It was a real thing in World War II, and unfortunately, NSA happened to tweet something about it today, and they referred to the Navajo code talkers of using perfect encryption, to which I pulled what was left of my hair out, because they didn't do encryption, they did codes. That's why they called them code talkers.
Right.
They spoke in their native tongue, but they also used code words to signify different things, and you can Google it and find out. A
Jeff,
buffalo was a tank,
right?
An eagle was a plane, stuff like that.
Would you consider that security through obscurity, or is it more well defined as really just code?
No, I refer to that as cryptography. It's not always about encryption. I mean, there's two basic types of cryptography. There's ciphers and there's codes. I just finished watching on Netflix. There's a show that I think was on AMC or something originally, but it's all about the Revolutionary War and a spy ring called the Culper spy ring. The name of the show is called Turn Washington Spies. They used codes. Every individual that was involved, either a military figure or people that were members of the spy ring, they had a code number. So they would talk about George Washington happened to be 7-Eleven. So they would talk about 7-Eleven is in, and then they had a code number for, let's say, New York City or
and Jeff,
Valley Forge or whatever.
So a code is basically on the premise that there's a key, right, that maps the code to the...
Well, you can sort of call it a key, if you will. The basic difference, and it's a hard concept, I think, for a lot of people to grasp, myself included, because we sort of use the terminology interchangeably these days.
Yeah, agree.
But ciphers traditionally are doing something more on a letter-by-letter basis to change or replace. Like a Caesar cipher, a Rot 13, whatever, is a letter-for-letter substitution, whereas a code is more of a substitution based on words or phrases or ideas. And there's real life versions of codes that we used to know about. Like, if you would write a letter or mail a package, we have this thing called the zip code, which, 5 numbers, nowadays 9 numbers, mean a specific building that was a post office in a specific area. So it's a shorter representation. Sort of akin to tokenization. That's becoming more common. But it's a value, or even data compression for that matter. A lot of communication traffic in the early days, or prior to the internet, when it was all about radio communications, where you were trying to send a lot of data, all the different schemes for data compression to try to squeeze it down, or even in the early days of the internet when bandwidth was much more of an issue because we were all on modems, any kind of data compression was basically a form of coding, and we called it encoding.
Right. Is that why Morse code is called a code, but is Morse code also a protocol? A communication protocol in that sense, or is it more the code?
It's the code.
That's a code, right?
The code. Yeah. I would argue that the protocol is the method in which it's delivered.
Yes, you're right.
And so you can deliver that over ASCII, or you can deliver it over the
This is a really exciting, nerdy conversation, and I'm very excited about it.
Well, and it's important from my nerdy crypto background to make the distinction, because you said, well, isn't the thing
Navajo,
that they use to translate the Navajo code talkers, isn't that the key? No, they called it a code book. It's a list of, here's the words or phrases or locations or whatever it was, and here's the code word. And that's distinctly different, because ciphers are where you start using keys, which are and key is a random stream that's designed to be applied using some sort of algorithm to your message to eliminate the characteristics of whatever language, the frequency of letters, the pattern of letters.
So a cipher would imply encryption or cryptography. You choose the word, Jeff. You're the expert in this area.
Encryption is associated with ciphers.
Yep.
Where in the most simplistic way I can describe it is it's a letter for letter, either transposition, which is just changing the order, or it's a substitution, however convoluted it is, or the ultimate cryptography solution is a one-time pad where you have a random stream of characters that you're applying using some algorithm to your message to produce cipher. And because it's a random stream, the key that nobody knows, and presumably there's only 2 copies, one on each end, and if you protect all that, it's unbreakable. You can intercept the communication in between, and it doesn't matter how many messages you get because every message has been encrypted with a different key. I watched the Imitation Game not too long ago because it came up on Netflix.
What did you think of it? Personally, I love that movie. For the one reason I love that movie is people who are not akin to what we do in security or technology came to me and said, like, I watched this movie and it was like the person that invented the computer and like broke these codes and stuff. And I'm like, oh, the Imitation Game. They're like, how did you know what that was based on my, I'm like, that because that's the beginning of really our field in both technology and security, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the movie. I was a little bit disappointed because I thought they made more of a story about sort of his personal life, which I think is a significant issue, and less on the cryptography.
Yeah, I don't want to downplay.
Less on the cryptography.
Yeah, I don't want to downplay that because I think the whole story behind Alan Turing's life is very significant. It's something that needs to be evangelized.
They were the code breakers in World War II.
And very shitty.
Very
Jeff,
I mean,
the technical term for that is very shitty.
And quite honestly, we use that movie to introduce our eldest daughter into homosexuality.
Yeah,
because we showed that there are absolutely brilliant people. There are people of all sorts out there that have different proclivities.
Yeah,
and she saw this and was like, well, why did they do that to him?
It's a lesson to treat people equally.
Because it was wrong at the time.
It wasn't culturally right, but the man was brilliant. And what he did in building the decryption algorithms to intercept the initial kind of key that he needed to understand how to bring that in and go through the algorithms to really decrypt the rest of the message was... I mean, it's modern day computers in a lot of respects.
Ultimately, for clarity, it wasn't about with our kids.
But hold on, Jeff. Yeah, I think Turing was more about automating the process, whereas others define the process.
Yes, and for us,
he essentially built the computer, but others had already figured out how to break them.
And for us,
the problem was they changed the key every day, and it would sometimes take them 3, 4, 5 days to decrypt the message.
Right. And for us,
they knew how to do it.
And for us, it wasn't about saying that you have to be brilliant to be accepted. It was that you should accept everyone for who they are, regardless of what they do.
Very well put, Larry.
Very
Agreed. But also speaks to automation in our field today.
Oh my God.
Right? Like that was what Turing... We should all go back to Turing to understand that lesson of how important computers and automation are in our society.
Automation.
Yeah.
Automation. To pull back a little bit on the history.
But also the limitation of automation, because I glaze over on a lot of our technical discussions because I keep hearing, well, we just come up with this gee whiz new technology and that solves everything. I'm like, well, just wait for it. And this was the banner week of all this great technology you have still is vulnerable, still has security holes. I'm sorry, go ahead, Larry.
So to pull us back on the history, there were initially 15 Navajo code talkers, expanded immediately to 29. By the time the war was over, there were a total of 350 Navajo code talkers. And as part of that development, they had to invent 211 Navajo words to describe stuff. And part of what made it incredibly difficult for someone else to try to interpret, is that the language structure of the Navajo language is incredibly difficult for non-native speakers to figure out.
Gotcha.
That tenses and cases and all that type of things are super
yeah,
crazy.
things that in computers and technology today don't necessarily, to use a kind of ironic word, translate, right? Yeah.
And that's what natural language processing is supposed to do.
Exactly.
And it is not a natural language by any stretch of the imagination. And of those 29 original, the last one died in 2014.
Wow.
So the most recent one obviously was part of that 350.
Mm-hmm. So, interesting.
And before
I love the discussion
and before Navajo
led to.
They used Choctaw in World War One, but between World War One and World War Two, our combatants figured out Choctaw, so we couldn't use Choctaw. So we had to figure out something else.
So I had to invent something new.
Lee?
Yeah. So one more piece to finish it. While we were talking, Shelley did the research. There are 7 code talkers left.
Navajo. Wow.
Navajo
code talkers left.
Can we get one on the podcast?
That'd be awesome.
That would be epic. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I learned, I did a talk at B-Sides Nova about codes and ciphers from Revolutionary War, which is where I learned about the Culper spy ring. And somebody told me, oh, there's a TV show about it, which is why I watched it. But one of the things I learned is one of the types of codes that were used is called a book code, where you pick words out of some book, and the code that you send is like the page number and the line number and the word.
Yep, but if you don't know the book,
it could be letter for letter. If you don't know the book, it's not broken. And there are coded messages that they still have in possession that have never been broken. 200 and some years in the future, because nobody knows what the source book was.
Yeah. Right, because they're not on Amazon.
The key space is too large.
And then if you want a mind bender, go read the Voynich manuscript.
What is that, Larry?
It's a very similar type of thing, that there was a guy who invented his own code, and it is allegedly, if I remember correctly, description of where treasure is located. Mm-hmm. And it's this massive volume that he created, and he created his own language, and no one's been able to figure out what the language is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Interesting.
Is that like Klingon?
Oh, well.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Wahoo.
Woohoo.
Alrighty, I think that concludes this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Larry, take us out.
Over and